Wind swept through the skeletons of fallen towers, carrying with it the dry rasp of dust and the faint metallic tang of decay. NYX-9 had once been a jewel of the outer colonies, a city of glass spires and shining transit lines threading between the stars. Now it was a graveyard of progress. Rust streaked the sky bridges, shattered domes gaped like open wounds, and the only movement came from the restless breath of storms that scoured the ruins clean of memory. Rain Donovan moved through the wreckage with the steady rhythm of a man who had nothing left but routine. His boots crunched over fractured stone, his tool pack slung across one shoulder, pulse pistol at his hip out of habit more than need. Every morning he checked perimeter sensors, patched the solar array, tested the water filters. Every evening he sat beneath the broken tower and watched the twin suns bleed out across the horizon. He told himself it was enough, the quiet, the isolation, the chance to forget. 6 months since he'd buried his uniform and name in the dust. 6 months since he'd stopped answering to Sergeant and started answering only to the wind. He didn't expect movement beyond the usual scavenger drone or wind-blown tarp, so when something shifted near the edge of the collapsed marketplace, he froze. Years of conditioning slid into place, breath slowed, eyes narrowed, hand drifting toward his weapon. The motion was wrong for a scavenger. Too unsteady, too small. Through the veil of amber dust, he glimpsed a silhouette stumbling between the ribs of a fallen transport hull. Human at first glance, until the light caught on blue skin. Rain crouched instinctively behind a chunk of ferrocrete, heart thudding. The figure emerged by degrees. A young female, slight, hairless, barefoot, her feet leaving fragile prints in the dirt. She wore a bundle of torn fabric tied around her shoulders, nothing that could protect against the heat or the cutting wind. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and she limped with the awkward gait of someone too weak to care. When she lifted her head, he saw her eyes enormous, indigo, reflecting both the fading sunlight and a fear so raw it stilled him where he crouched. For a long moment he stayed there, fighting the instinct to turn away. Involvement meant danger. He had sworn to live clean of other people's pain. But the way she trembled, the way her lips moved soundlessly, as if calling for someone who no longer existed, struck through his armor of solitude like a blade. "Damn it," he muttered, rising. He stepped out from behind the rubble, palms open to show he meant no harm. The girl froze, one bare foot slipping on a shard of metal. "Easy," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't answer, only stared, chest heaving with quick, frightened breaths. Up close he could see she was thin to the point of collapse, her skin mottled with dust and bruises. He gestured toward the direction of his shelter. "There's water, food, shelter." Another gust of wind whirled between them, sending grit against his face. The girl shivered violently. He unzipped his outer jacket, heavy canvas faded by sun and years, and held it out to her. "Here, take it." She hesitated, eyes flicking between him and the offered garment as though expecting a trap. Then, inch by cautious inch, she reached forward and took it. The jacket swallowed her completely, sleeves dragging as she clutched it tight against her chest. Her gaze lifted to his again, uncertain, but no longer wild. "You're safe," Rain said softly, surprised at the gentleness in his own tone. The words felt foreign, like something remembered from another life. She didn't speak, only gave a small nod, and he saw something fragile kindle in those alien eyes, hope, or the echo of it. He turned toward the ridge where his home stood. "Follow me if you want," he said without looking back. The wind hissed around them, and for a heartbeat he thought she'd vanish like the rest of NYX-9's ghosts. But then, faintly behind him, came the sound of bare feet touching stone, hesitant but real. Rain allowed himself a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He told himself it meant nothing, that he was only helping a stranger survive the night. But as the suns dipped below the broken horizon and her footsteps fell in rhythm with his, he knew something inside him had shifted. The walls he'd built around his solitude had cracked, and through them a small, nameless life had stepped into his world. The sun had vanished behind the dust horizon by the time Rain reached his outpost. The metal door groaned open, releasing a faint breath of filtered air that smelled of rust and recycled ozone. He gestured for the girl to enter first, watching her hesitation as she lingered on the threshold. Inside, the space was spare, with functional solar lights casting a dull amber glow over scavenged furniture, water condensers humming softly in the corner. It wasn't much, but to anyone who'd been surviving in the open ruins, it must have looked like a palace. She stepped inside at last, bare feet soundless on the metal floor. Her wide eyes flicked over everything, the pipes along the ceiling, the shelves lined with salvaged rations, the blankets neatly folded on a cot. She seemed to be mapping every escape route, every potential danger. Rain recognized the look. He'd worn it once himself when sent behind enemy lines. "Hungry?" he asked quietly. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. He pulled a container from the storage bin and set out a tin of preserved protein stew and a canteen of water on the small table. "It's not fancy, but it'll keep you alive." The girl approached the food with caution, eyes darting from him to the meal and back again. He stepped away, lowering himself to a crate across the room. "Go ahead. It's safe." Only when he looked elsewhere did she move, taking small bites at first, then faster, as hunger overruled fear. Rain felt a knot twist in his chest as he watched her devour the meal. The silence between them was broken only by the faint hum of the purifier and the distant wind rattling against the outer shell. When she finished, she sat very still, her fingers still clutching the empty tin as though afraid it might vanish. "You can rest here tonight," Rain said. "I'll take the floor." Her head snapped up, startled, as if the offer were too generous to believe. "Bathroom's back there," he added, gesturing toward the small alcove he'd built from scavenged partition panels. "There's warm water. You can clean up if you want." She stared at him for several seconds, lips parted but silent, then nodded. He led her to the corner, showed the crude valve system that controlled temperature and flow, and placed a towel within reach. "Take your time," he said, turning away. She didn't move until he left the doorway, giving her privacy. He rummaged through his supplies, searching for something that might fit her, a thermal undershirt, drawstring pants. He paused as the faint hiss of running water filled the silence, followed by a quiet, broken sound that wasn't mechanical at all. Sobbing, he froze, hands still inside the storage bin. It was soft at first, then deeper, the kind that came from somewhere too hollow to hide. Rain hesitated. Training told him to stay out on it. Compassion made him speak. "You're safe," he said through the panel, voice low. The sobs quieted, but didn't stop. "No one's going to hurt you here." Silence answered him, but something in the air shifted a tension easing, just slightly. He left the folded clothes by the door and stepped back, letting her have the moment alone. Minutes dragged. The water cut off. Then the door creaked open, and she emerged. Clean now, her blue skin gleamed faintly under the amber light, catching reflections from the solar panels above. She wore his oversized shirt, sleeves hanging past her hands, pants tied twice around her waist. Her eyes were red, but calmer, softer. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, voice a whisper. "Thank you." The words hit him harder than he expected. No one had thanked him in years. "You're welcome," he said, clearing his throat. "I'm Rain." Her head tilted slightly, tasting the sound. "Rain," she echoed. "Like water that falls." He smiled faintly. Exactly. I don't have a name, she said after a pause, her accent lilting in ways that made the words musical. Not anymore. Rain's smile faded. He wanted to ask what had happened, who had taken it from her, but the answer was already in her eyes. Then we'll worry about names later, he said. Right now, you need rest. He gestured toward the cot. It's yours for the night. She shook her head quickly. I can't take your bed. You can, and you will, he replied with a trace of gentle authority. I've slept on worse floors. After a long hesitation, she relented, perching on the edge of the cot like a stray afraid to believe in kindness. Rain dimmed the lights and spread his blanket on the floor. For a while, there was only the rhythm of their breathing and the whisper of wind outside. Just as he was drifting toward sleep, her voice floated through the darkness. Rain? Yeah? Why did you help me? He stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the question settle in his chest. Because you looked like someone who needed it, he said finally. There was a small, quiet pause, then a whisper so faint he almost missed it. No one ever does. The words hung in the dim air, long after her breathing steadied into sleep. Rain lay awake, listening to the hum of the generators, and realized that for the first time since Nix 9 became his exile, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. Morning crept into the ruins like a hesitant visitor, thin light filtering through the cracked ceiling panels and painting long bars of gold across the metal floor. Rain woke to the faint sound of movement, the soft clink of utensils, the cautious shuffle of bare feet. The girl was awake, crouched near the small stove, staring in fascination at the steady flicker of its blue flame. His old thermal shirt hung loose on her small frame, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Clean, she looked less like a ghost and more like someone who had once belonged somewhere. You're up early, he said quietly, rubbing a hand through his hair. She flinched at his voice, then offered the smallest nod. Couldn't sleep. Her voice was stronger now, though still shaped by caution. Rain poured 2 cups of reheated water from the purifier and handed her one. She took it with both hands, as if it were a gift. It's clean, he said. You can drink it. She sipped and closed her eyes. I forgot what clean water tastes like. There was no drama in the statement, just simple truth. Rain studied her for a moment. You never told me where you're from. The question lingered, but she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced toward the window slats, where the pale sky shimmered through layers of dust. It doesn't exist anymore, she said finally. Most of it burned. Her tone was flat, distant, like she was reciting a report rather than remembering. Rain didn't push. He knew the sound of ghosts when he heard them. Do you remember your name? He asked after a moment. She hesitated, fingers tightening around the metal cup. I used to have one, she said softly. Before they took it. The words carried a tremor of memory. They said names were for people, not property. The cup rattled as her hands shook. Rain set his down and moved closer, careful not to crowd her. You're not property anymore, he said. Not here. Her gaze lifted to his, and for the first time, he saw anger beneath the sadness, a flicker of something fierce that had survived when everything else hadn't. She nodded once, slow but resolute. Then I'll choose a new one, she said. Someday. Rain allowed himself a faint smile. That's a good start. He turned back to the console, checking sensor readouts, but his thoughts lingered on her words. Property. The word gnawed at him. He'd seen plenty of horrors in war bodies, betrayals, cities turned to ash, but the idea of a person stripped of their name unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. He shut the system down and started repairing a cracked power conduit to distract himself. Rain? She asked after a while. Why do you live here? In the ruins? He didn't answer immediately. The question was fair, and he wasn't sure he liked the answer. "Because I was part of what ruined it," he said at last. She tilted her head, curiosity replacing fear. "You?" Rain straightened, rubbing at the scar along his jaw. "I was with Earth's Tactical Response Unit Operation, Midnight Sun. We were told this city hid a weapon that could wipe out human colonies. We were ordered to neutralize it." Her expression went still, the color draining from her face. "Operation Midnight Sun," she whispered. Her voice cracked, the cup slipping from her fingers and clattering to the floor. "You were here." The weight in her tone made his stomach drop. "You know about it?" She stood abruptly, trembling. "I was in the cum hub when your soldiers came. We tried to tell them there were no weapons. It was a research facility, a cure lab. You destroyed it." Her voice broke into something between rage and despair. Rain felt the air leave his lungs. The images he'd buried clawed their way back. The command feed flashing green, the clean detonation, the plume of light swallowing the city's heart. "We were told it was a threat," he said, but it sounded weak even to him. "We believed, you believed what was easy," she snapped, tears streaking down her blue cheeks. "And you killed us for it." He took a step forward, then stopped, hands open. "You think I don't know that?" he said quietly. "You think I haven't replayed it every night for 3 years?" Silence fell like a curtain between them. The girl no. The woman stared at him, eyes shimmering with hurt and exhaustion. Finally, she sank onto the cot, pulling the too large jacket tighter around her. "Why did you help me then?" she asked, voice breaking. Rain didn't answer right away. He knelt slowly, resting his arms on his knees, meeting her gaze. "Because I saw someone left behind," he said. "Like me." The words hung in the air, raw and heavy. She looked away, but the trembling in her shoulders eased. After a long silence, she whispered, "My people called humans reckless. You build fast, destroy faster." "They weren't wrong," he said. She gave a faint, bitter laugh, a sound halfway between pain and release. "Maybe not." The wind outside moaned through the cracks in the roof, a sound like distant mourning. For a long while, neither spoke. Then she said quietly, "If you're telling the truth, if you were one of them, then you owe me more than food and shelter." Rain nodded once solemn. "I know." "Then start by listening," she said, "to what really happened." And so, as the first full light of morning broke over Nix-Nine's scarred skyline, the two of them sat in the ruined soldier and survivor, each realizing that the war they thought had ended was only now beginning inside them. By afternoon, the light had turned copper, thick with dust from the high plains that wrapped Nix-Nine in a constant twilight. Rain spent the day in silence, working on the outer wall to keep his hands busy, but the girl's words wouldn't leave his mind. Every clang of his wrench echoed against the memories he'd tried for years to bury shouts through cum channels, the heat bloom of an orbital strike, the silence that followed. Inside the shelter she moved quietly, still wary, still raw. When the wind dropped to a low moan, he went back in. She sat near the small viewport, knees pulled up, staring at the dying light. "There were no weapons," she said without turning. "We were healers. My mother worked in the medical dome, studying the Crimson Plague. Your people thought we were making it worse. We were curing it." Rain leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I believe you. Belief doesn't change what happened." Her tone wasn't cruel, just tired. He hesitated, then said softly, "Then tell me everything." She looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes, then nodded. As she spoke, her voice wove between steady and trembling. She told him of the day the sky burned, of the thunder that fell from orbit, of her people running through corridors, filled with smoke and screams. She'd been a translator for the Vexery Council, trapped when the comm hub collapsed. For days she dug through wreckage, until the air itself turned to poison. When she stopped talking, the silence between them felt alive. And after? Rain asked. After the attack? There was no after, she whispered. Just ghosts. He wanted to reach out, to say something human, but before he could, a shrill tone cut through the room. A perimeter alarm. Rain moved instinctively to the console. A flickering image appeared on the cracked Monitor 6 figures, advancing through the ruins from the west, dust trailing behind them. Uniformed. Earth Alliance, he muttered. The words froze her. They came back? Looks like it. His mind raced. If they found her, they'd arrest her or worse. She caught the fear in his face and straightened. Go, she said. If they see me, they'll kill me. No one's killing anyone. Rain grabbed his jacket and holstered his pistol. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Rain, do it. She obeyed, sealing the panel as he stepped out into the bitter air. He kept low between wrecked transport husks, circling to intercept the intruders before they reached his shelter. The sun was setting, long shadows stretching through the ruins. As the soldiers came into view, Rain recognized their formation-tight, disciplined, textbook alliance maneuvering. The lead figure stopped at a mound of debris, scanning the area. Even at a distance, Rain knew that voice when it barked an order. Major Thorn, his old commanding officer, the last man he'd ever taken orders from. Identify yourself. Thorn's voice carried across the rubble. Rain stepped out slowly, hands visible. You already know who I am. The soldiers tensed, weapons snapping up until Thorn raised a hand. Donovan? He said, disbelief cutting through the authority. In the flesh. Thorn approached, boots crunching over glass. He looked older, but the hard edges were the same. You were listed Kier after midnight sun. Convenient, Rain said. For everyone. We thought you were dead. Why the hell are you still here? Rain glanced around the desolate landscape. Penance. Thorn studied him, then sighed. Still can't follow simple orders, can you? We're on a diplomatic mission. Rain raised an eyebrow. Diplomatic here? New intelligence, Thorn said. Turns out we were wrong about this place. The Vexery weren't building weapons, they were making medicine. We were fed lies by the Krelll Dominion. They wanted humans and Vexery at war while they expanded their borders. Rain felt the words like a blow. You're saying it was all for nothing? Worse than nothing, Thorn said grimly. We wiped out our best chance at peace? The admission hung in the air, heavy as the dust around them. Rain's mind spun Jira's voice, her accusations, her grief, all of it true. Why are you here now? He asked. We're trying to make amends. The Alliance wants to re-establish contact with any surviving Vexery. We detected human and non-human life signs in the ruins. Thought it might be survivors. Rain's pulse quickened. If you find them, what then? Reparation, cooperation, whatever it takes, Thorn said. We're not here to kill anyone. Rain studied him, searching for deceit. There was none, just the worn honesty of a soldier who'd seen too much. Slowly, Rain lowered his voice. Then there's someone you need to meet. Thorn frowned. Who? A survivor, Vexery. The soldiers behind him exchanged wary glances. She's alive? Barely, Rain said. And she deserves to hear that apology from someone other than me. Thorn hesitated, then nodded. Lead the way. The walk back was slow, tense, the kind of quiet that comes when history itself holds its breath. Rain's boots felt heavier with every step. He thought of Jira waiting behind the sealed door, still believing every human face meant danger. When they reached the ridge, The shelter stood silent against the wind. Rain stopped at the threshold. "Before we go in," he said, turning to Thorn, "she's not just a survivor. She's the reason I'm still alive. Treat her with respect or leave now." Thorn's expression softened. "Understood." Rain opened the door. Warm light spilled into the ruins. "Jira," he called. "It's me." For a long heartbeat, there was no sound. Then she appeared from the shadows, wrapped in his oversized shirt, pulse pistol in hand. Her eyes flicked Thorn and his men, hard and unreadable. "Earth Alliance," she said, the words tasting like rust. Rain raised a calming hand. "They're not here to hurt you. They came to talk." Thorn removed his sidearm and set it on the table between them. "On behalf of the Alliance," he said, voice solemn, "we're sorry for what we did. We were deceived, but that doesn't excuse the lives lost." Jira didn't lower the pistol. "Words can't rebuild what you destroyed." "No," Thorn said quietly, "but maybe they can stop it from happening again." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Jira's grip on the weapon eased. Her gaze shifted to Rain, searching, uncertain. "Can we trust them?" she whispered. Rain looked at his former commander, then back at her. "We have to try." Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the metal walls, carrying with it the ghosts of a dead city. For the first time, Rain realized that maybe, just maybe, the ruins of Nix 9 were ready to hear voices again. Night had fallen by the time Rain and Jira finished clearing the table for Thorn's team. The small room felt too tight, with so many soldiers inside, their breath fogging faintly in the chill. The air was thick with tension, the kind that hums between former enemies, pretending to be allies. Thorn's men kept their hands close to their holsters, eyes flicking toward Jira as though afraid she might vanish into blue smoke. She stayed near the back wall, arms folded across Rain's oversized shirt, watching every movement with feline precision. Thorn spoke quietly, with Rain near the power console. "We need her help," he said. "Our scientists found traces of a pathogen in multiple colonies. We believe it's the same strain the Vicheri were researching the Crimson Plague." Rain frowned. "You mean it's back?" "Worse," Thorn replied grimly. "It's evolved. We're calling it the Ashen Plague. 80% mortality rate. It's engineered. The Krell's handiwork." Jira's head lifted at the name. The Krell. Her voice turned cold. "They were behind the first plague. We fought them long before your people ever came." Thorn looked up. "Then you might know how to stop it." Jira shook her head slowly. "Not me, but there are others. A sanctuary, deep beneath the old city. They kept the knowledge alive after your strike." The soldiers exchanged glances, uneasy at the mention of something still living under the ruins. "You never told me about this," Rain said, trying to keep accusation from his tone. "It wasn't my secret to share," she replied. "But if your people truly seek peace, the elders there can help." "We do," Thorn said quickly. "The Alliance is ready to make reparations, territorial concessions, technology exchange, whatever it takes." Jira studied him for a long moment, weighing the sincerity in his eyes. "Then you'll stay here," she said finally. "Rain and I will go to the sanctuary. If I bring soldiers, they'll see it as another invasion." Thorn hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but if you're not back in 72 hours, you'll assume the worst," Rain finished. "Understood." As the soldiers settled for the night, Rain checked his gear. He caught Jira's reflection in the window, still wary, still beautiful in that fragile, haunted way that made something tighten in his chest. When their eyes met, the fear between them softened into something else entirely. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "You could stay and let someone else lead you into danger?" She replied with a faint smile. You'd only follow me anyway. He couldn't argue. Outside, the twin moons were climbing, pale silver and deep red, casting ghostlight across the ruins. Jira looked toward them as she spoke. My people have a saying, she said softly. Those who walk into darkness together need no map. That sounds a lot like trouble, Rain murmured. Sometimes trouble is the only way home. At dawn they left the outpost, climbing down through the ravine that cut through the city's bones. Wind whispered through fractured towers, as if warning them to turn back. They moved in silence, each step taking them deeper into the scars of the past. As daylight filtered down through fractured domes, Rain noticed the way Jira's feet barely disturbed the dust. She'd refused his offer of boots, explaining that her kind could sense vibrations through their soles, a gift of evolution from a world that quaked beneath its own seas. She led confidently, weaving through rubble as if the ruins themselves recognized her. Hours passed before she stopped at a collapsed transport yard. Here, she said, kneeling to brush away a layer of grime. Beneath it lay what looked like solid ground until her hand shimmered through the illusion. A holographic seal flickered and dissolved, revealing a staircase descending into blue light. You've been here before, Rain said. Once, she murmured, when I was a child. The air grew cooler as they descended, the hum of hidden machinery vibrating faintly through the walls. At the bottom lay a chamber so pristine, it took Rain's breath away. Arched ceilings of polished alloy, flowing light tubes carrying luminescent fluid, air that smelled faintly of ozone and salt. Dozens of Vixeri moved between consoles and crystalline vats, their indigo eyes turning in unison toward the intruders. A tall figure stepped forward, skin pale with age and markings etched in silver along his temples. Jira, he said in their lilting tongue. You returned and brought a human. His gaze settled on Rain, sharp and assessing. Elder Pox, Jira said, bowing her head. This is Rain Donovan. He saved my life. The elder studied Rain a moment longer, then spoke in accented standard. The one who spared you does not erase those who did not. I know, Rain said, holding his gaze. But I also know we were lied to. The Krelll wanted this war. They're spreading the same plague again, and they'll destroy us all if we stay divided. Pox's expression didn't change, but murmurs rippled through the chamber. Jira stepped closer to the elder. He speaks the truth. The humans seek peace. They need our help. And why should we trust them? Pox asked. Because I do, she said simply. The words hung there, shimmering like light in water. The elder's eyes softened, just slightly. The council must decide, he said at last. Until then, you will both remain here under guard. Elder, no harm will come to you, Pox said, cutting her off. But the world above is not safe for either of you tonight. 2 Vexery escorts gestured toward a narrow passage. Jira touched Rain's hand as they followed, a gesture small but grounding. The quarters they were given were modest one sleeping platform, a soft glow pulsing from the walls. As the door sealed, Rain exhaled for the first time in hours. That went well, he said dryly. Better than expected, she replied, lips curving faintly. She reached out, tracing a faint pattern across his chest with her finger symbols that glowed briefly before fading. What's that? He asked. A blessing, she said, for courage in the face of what comes. He caught her hand before she could pull away. We've already come through worse. No, she said softly, her eyes luminous in the dim light. The worst is still coming. Somewhere deep within the sanctuary, a low hum began to build alarms, rising like the pulse of a living world. Rain looked toward the ceiling. What now? Ships, Jira whispered, her pupils contracting to narrow slits. The Krelll have found us. The alarm became a steady vibration in the floor, a living pulse that ran through the walls and into Rain's bones. He was on his feet in an instant, scanning for gear, while Jira pressed her palm to a wall panel that shimmered open into a tactical display. Strange glyphs scrolled across it, alive with light. Her expression hardened as she read. 3 Krell cruisers in orbit, she said, and at least 4 drop ships inbound. The calm precision of her voice didn't match the panic flickering in the corridor outside. Vexery raced past their door, their movements fluid and purposeful, blue skin flashing under emergency lights. Rain pulled on his jacket, tightening the strap on the pulse pistol. They're coming for the sanctuary. They can't know the entrance, Jira said, though the tremor in her tone betrayed doubt. Unless... Rain's eyes met hers. Unless they followed us. The words hit the air like a slap. He shook his head. No. Thorne's team, they were broadcasting alliance signals. That's what the Krell picked up. Jira didn't argue. She didn't have to. The truth was obvious. Elder Pox will order the tunnels sealed, she said, already moving toward the door. We need to reach the command chamber before that happens. They ran through glowing corridors as the sanctuary came alive with coordinated chaos holographic barriers igniting. Mechanical sentries unfolding for walls. The hum of reactors deepened as power rerouted to defense grids. Rain couldn't help marveling, even amid the tension. You people call this primitive? He muttered, ducking beneath a low arch. We call it survival, she shot back. They entered the central chamber where Pox stood surrounded by council members and armored Vixery guards. The old leader's expression was calm, but his voice carried the weight of urgency. The Krell ships have entered low orbit. They are deploying landing craft. We've sealed the main corridors. That won't stop them, Rain said. They'll breach from above or dig through. We need to move the fight topside. Several Vixery bristled at his intrusion, but Pox regarded him with cool interest. And risk exposing the sanctuary to the sky? You forget yourself, human. No, Rain said, stepping forward. I remember what they do to civilians. I've fought them before. If you wait, you'll lose this place. Let me coordinate with my people. Major Thorne's team is on the surface. We can set a defensive line. Pox's gaze flicked to Jira. You trust him still, even now? With my life, she said simply. That silenced the room more effectively than any order. After a long pause, Pox nodded once. Very well. Commander Krell, you will accompany them. If the Krell breach, collapse the tunnels. Protect the sanctuary above all else. Understood, said a tall Vexery in silver armor, his expression grim. Within minutes, they were armed and on the move. Rain checked the alien rifle Jira handed him, sleek and perfectly balanced. Pulse disruptor, she explained. High energy yield, short cooldown. He gave her a wry grin. Better than anything Earth ever issued me. They climbed the narrow emergency tunnel that led toward the surface, the air growing heavier with dust and static charge. When they emerged under the broken spire, dawn was bleeding across the horizon. A dim orange glow filtered through the storm haze. From the ridgeline, they could see dark shapes descending Krell dropships, cutting through the clouds like metal locusts. They'll land in the old civic sector, Rain said. If we hit them before they deploy heavy units, we have a chance. Major Thorne's position is that way, Jira said, pointing toward the distant rise. If they're alive. They're alive, Rain said. He's too stubborn to die. They moved fast through the ruins, debris shifting underfoot, the cold wind stinging their faces. When they reached the old plaza, Earth Alliance soldiers were already setting up a perimeter. Thorne turned at the sight of them and froze when he saw the Vixery squad at Rain's back. I'll be damned, he said. You actually found them. No time for reunions, Rain said. Krell are inbound. Thorn glanced at the sky, jaw tightening. We picked up their signal 10 minutes ago. They're deploying ground armor. And we hold them here, Rain said. Vexury tech, human tactics. Let's see if cooperation means anything. Thorn gave a thin, grim smile. Never thought I'd say this, Donovan, but I'll follow your lead. The first dropship hit the surface with a thunderous crack, spilling dust and shards of metal. From its belly poured armored figures, reptilian, tall, encased in chitin and steel. The Krell moved like a tide, methodical and merciless. Hold your fire, Rain ordered, crouched behind the remains of a transport hull. He waited until they crossed the broken fountain in the center of the square. Now! The ruins exploded with light. Vexury disruptors screamed through the air, slicing through Krell armor, while Alliance rifles spat concentrated plasma. The enemy reeled under the surprise, half their front line collapsing before they could regroup. Jira's voice echoed through the comms, translating orders between both sides with calm precision. Flank left. Defensive grid to the northeast. She moved like she'd been born for this chaos fearless, commanding, her bare feet barely touching the ground as she ducked between positions. Rain followed her through the smoke, firing controlled bursts, each shot dropping another Krell. But even as they drove the enemy back, the sky filled with more dropships. We can't hold forever, Thorn shouted. We don't have to, Rain said, eyes narrowing as a massive armored figure stepped down from the nearest craft. Its armor bore an ornate crest, symbols carved deep into the plates. That's their commander, Rain said. Varar. The name tasted like venom. The bastard who fed us the false intel. Jira's jaw tightened. Then this ends with him. She touched Rain's arm. Let me go with you. Not a chance. It's not a request. For a heartbeat they stared at each other, the chaos around them fading. Then he nodded. Fine, but stay behind me. Together they broke from cover, advancing through the smoke toward the towering Krell. Varar turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw them approach one human, one Vexury, side by side. The traitor and the abomination, he hissed, his translator spitting static. Perfect. You lied, Rain said, his voice low. You turned two worlds into a graveyard. We revealed the truth, Varar snarled. Your species are children playing with God's toys. You needed to be reminded of your place. Guess we didn't listen. Rain raised the disruptor and fired. The blast caught VR squarely, driving him back but not down. The creature roared, striking with a blade of molten energy. Rain blocked, stumbled, countered years of training, turning into instinct. Jira darted around him, firing short controlled bursts at the gaps in Varar's armor. The Krell staggered, wounded but still deadly. With a final lunge, his blade sliced across Rain's chest, burning through fabric and flesh. Pain flared white-hot. He fell, gasping, the world tilting. Jira screamed his name, firing again and again until the blasts tore through Varar's helm. The Krell toppled, armor smoking, body collapsing in a hiss of steam. Rain felt her hands on him, cool against the heat of his wound. Stay with me, she whispered. Please. You always... Say that, he managed, voice fading. Her tears fell onto his skin, glowing faintly as they mixed with her blood. The world dissolved into light. When he woke, it was to the steady hum of medtech and the scent of ozone. Jira was there, eyes bright with exhaustion and relief. You're alive, she said softly. How? The serum, she said. The cure your people destroyed it saved you. And now it will save your worlds. He reached for her hand. What happened to the Krell? Defeated, she said. Your commander called reinforcements. A council has agreed to share the cure. Peace has begun. Rain laughed weakly. About time. Months later, the ruins of Nix 9 were gone. In their place stood Aurora, a city of twin banners, human and Vexery, rising from the dust like a promise. On its highest balcony, Rain leaned against the rail, scars still healing, watching the sun set over glass domes and green-lit towers. Jira joined him, her bare feet silent on the stone. She wore a pendant forged from the spire that once hid the sanctuary. "You still hate the rain?" She teased. "Depends," he said, turning to her. "If it means you, I'll take the storm." She smiled, slipping her hand into his. Below them, children laughed in 2 languages, and for the first time since the war, the world felt whole. The wind swept through the streets of Aurora, no longer the moan of ghosts, but the breath of something reborn.